G'day, friends and fans. I'm the author, David Applegate, the author of the book, The Boyhood of Cade, one of the Empire of Elves. And welcome to Future Fantasy Empire. Today with me is Zoe Tasia, the author of Kilts and Catnip, Bagpipes and Basil, A Happy Christmas Ceilidh, and other interesting books. And of course, I've yourself, please, Zoe.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. When did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, goodness. I've been telling short stories to my cousins and my sister ever since I can remember, certainly way before I could read and write, so forever.
Right. Now, please tell us more about your books. I mean, I've only given the first couple off the list.
I write a cozy fantasy series. It takes place in Scotland. By cozy, I mean there is no sex, very little in the way of cussing and violence. And it centers around a small village, the village of Thistle, that is on the Shrouded Isle. There are two main characters. The first one is Becca Shaw. She's an American widow with two daughters. She moves to Scotland and goes on vacation to the Shrouded Isle. The other one is Greg Gilly. He's a local Scot, and he guards the gateway to the Fae world, and he makes sure if anything escapes from there, he sends the Fae right back there. The series as a whole, it's going to be a 6-book series, and it's going to have probably at least 6 short stories, novellas, and novelettes, probably tied with seasons and holidays. The main thing it's about is relationships. It's about the relationship, how the relationship changes between Becca and her daughter, how the romance develops between her and Greg, how the community gets to know her and adjust to having her there, because it's a small, very insular community. The first book, Kilts and Catnip, Becca's come over there with her daughters for vacation. Greg Gilly, as I said, he guards the doorway to the Fae world. He notices whenever Becca arrives, he's having more and more Fae escape. He wants her to leave the island. She says, no, I'm not leaving the island. Instead, the two end up working together to find out why all these Fae are escaping and how are they able to keep them there. And from there in Bagpipes and Basil, she moves to the island permanently rather than just being there on vacation. She figures, okay, I moved here. I'm going to help Greg with guarding the gateway. And his title is Keeper. And Keeper, that's what a keeper does. And she figures, okay, everything ought to be fine. Unfortunately, someone's playing these awful malicious tricks on the villagers. They, of course, believe it's the Fae. Greg says, no, it's not the Fae. It's definitely not the Fae. So in that book, what they have to do is find out, well, it's not the Fae. Who is it? And put that to a stop. So that's, Tartan and Time will come out hopefully later this month. And at that point, you're introduced to changelings, which are human children that have been stolen by the Fae and taken back to their land. And the Fae Queen is building basically an army of changelings that she's going to send to war on the islanders. And what Becca and Greg ideally want to do, of course, these are children. Yes, they've been sent by the Fae Queen, but they're children. So what they want to do is stop the war and avoid anybody getting hurt. That's pretty much the series.
Have you visited any of the haunts?
Listen to any what?
Well, I've been throughout parts of Europe, the old Huns, the Fey villages, as some would call them, the standing stones, any of those?
I lived in Scotland for 7.5 years.
Yeah.
And I was near in the Aberdeen area.
Yeah, there's a few out there. Yeah, quite a few.
And
Aberdeen Hill is artificial. It was actually built 6,500 years ago. And it's still standing.
Visiting the castles, seeing the stone circles, all that.
Yeah.
It was just wonderful. I really did. So I knew I wanted to write at least a book that took place there.
One of the oldest iron fortresses in the world was built in Scotland, and they wonder why people built them. Well, according to legend, the Fae were harmed by iron. It was, they couldn't even touch it, and hence they built iron fortresses. Even though they didn't use iron for anything else, they took all the iron they could to make these walls. And I think people don't understand. The Huns. These were, according to legend, this is actually where the word Sith comes from. It actually is a reference to the Fey realm. I mean,
I ended up doing a lot of research on the folklore in Scotland. I used that a lot in the book.
Yeah, the cat Sith was originally known as the elf cat until about the 14th century, and then from then on it was called the witch's cat. But that's a real cat, by the way. Yeah, there's a real cat. That is, yeah, it is a real cat. I used to have one. But the Kusith, the shaggy hound, as they named it now, or the bog dog, as they call it in Ireland sometimes. But that was also known as the Elven Hound. I mean, the Sith just refers to the people, of the people. That's what Sith means. I mean, but anybody who thinks George Lucas is a genius who came up with these amazing words, no. Maul is actually an Irish warhammer, I believe.
Well,
a lot of research too for my book. Yeah, I gather when you prepare for a new book, you do a lot of research.
Yes, I do a lot of research. Like I said, folklores and mythology is what I primarily focus on. But I also have to go back and, I lived in Scotland, but it's been a while ago. So I have to go back and make sure that I've got my facts right. And things haven't changed since I've been there. So I'm not saying something that doesn't make sense anymore. The book takes place in about 2019, 2018. And that's also a factor. I can't talk about like Stranger Things because Stranger Things isn't there during that time period.
Yeah. There's a site, I believe. There's TV Tropes, TV Guide, which tells you where all the TV Guide, still up, I think, tells you when all the TV programs came out. And I think it's, is it CultureNet? It tells you all the different events and things, different time periods. So there's enough historical research there. I mean, there's also the History Channel. I think there's amazing stuff out there for authors who really want to delve into folklore, particularly the folklore of Scotland, because elves are not unique to Germanic culture, nor are changelings. Changelings in Germanic folklore are associated with the troll. And people think of the troll as the Nordic troll, the big, ugly, shambling man. No, the German troll was actually a 3-foot tall humanoid with bald, graying hair. They always looked old. And whenever a human lost a child, they would create a changeling to replace it. There are different myths of the changelings, but they all involve children and the changing of children. Now we actually have. Hello, Fire King. Thank you for tuning in. Now, in Scotland, the elves were known as the Ceilidh, but that changed a couple of times throughout history. In Ireland, they were known as the Airshee, although that also changed a couple of times. Now, the word elf, alp, and has appeared, I suppose, in thousands of different forms. The actual name Alfred means elf friend. It wasn't a name, it used to be a title. And what people think of the pentagram that was used to be known until the 12th century as the elf cross. And if you look on some grave markings in Ireland, particularly old ones, you'll see it in a circle. Now, the Celtic cross replaced it, I believe, in the 14th century. And now the circle of protection actually meant that the protectors would know that you're a friend, so they would pass you by. When, as people may or may not know, up until about the 18th century, police, what's that?
You also look a lot in the Druids and bring that in. I take liberties with it. I do ship things around, but I do the research to actually know as much as I can about it. And then I usually stick with the Scottish culture, but draw from other cultures too.
Oh yeah, the Scottish experience with the Airshee, the Ceilidh, the Picts, they weren't always on the best of terms, but yeah, mostly the elves were depicted as the protectors, and the druids were the go-betweens. You couldn't talk to the people of the forest. You had to talk to the druids, and they would pass on the message. Yes, hello, Fire King. Thank you for dropping by and saying hello. I think he's actually on. Yes. Now, what particular methods do you use? What source material do you have? Do you actually have some of the folklore books from Scotland?
Oh, I have read a lot of folklore books and mythology and folklore. I've been fascinated with that since I was a little kid. I would go and get nonfiction books and read it and read it and read it. So I'm definitely familiar with a lot of stuff that I go in more depth whenever I'm going to use some character just to make sure I have my facts straight. And then I might change them around a little bit, but at least wise, I want to be able to say, okay, I did look into this. I know this is the way it is, but I've changed a little bit for my world.
Oh yeah. We all adapt. I mean, the Fae, the tricksters, in some culture, in Nordic, they're referred to as the Dokafar or the Dark People. The regular elves were known as the Lokafar, but in the Irish it was known as, like I said, Osith. But see, the Sith comes from the Ceilidh, from when from Gaelic to Celtic, they would drop letters, but they'd keep the pronunciation. But later in the texts, where they would write it literally, and so there's that 17th to 18th century jump, which is the pronunciations actually changed. And it's quite a quite a history of language in there. But the experiences in the folklore, there are subtle differences that perhaps you've picked up as well. That to the most of the people, there was just such an awe and reverence, for the and I think it's only in modern times that folklore hasn't been a children's book. Up until recent times, most children's books were folklores. They were like I suppose you would say they're like morality tales, the tales of Fuan. So,
Now that could be pretty dark too,
oh,
especially original.
absolutely. Mm. Oh yeah, yeah. Fall down a leprechaun hole, and yeah, the come back 100 years later, which was the origins of the Rip Van Winkle tales. As because when they went to America, they tried to adapt to the folklore to a new generation, and because they couldn't bring much with them, the oral tales become very branched and very varied very quickly. Do you have a particular sorry, do you have a favorite writer or a particular book you
I like a lot of different authors. I like a lot of different genres. I tend to read a lot of fantasy because I write a lot of fantasy. I'm going to branch out into mystery books too at some point, and I co-write under the name Zoe Reed, and we've written psychological thrillers, romances, and different stuff like that. I really like Anne McCaffrey. I like her because she's science fiction and fantasy. I like J.L. Bryan. He is a mystery writer. And I like Charlene Harris. So I tend to focus on those. I am a member of a writing group, which is great. I get a lot of support with them. But I'm also a member of a readers discussion group. And that forces me to get out of my comfort zone and read stuff that I might not normally pick up.
I think that's yeah, I've read a wide variety myself, and I actually appreciate now and again the I've mostly written science fiction, but it's a blend of science fiction and fantasy that, and of course, it's commonly referred to as science fantasy, but in the writing community, whereas in the public, you would, oh, it's science fiction. Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Star Wars is science fantasy. It's got
Yeah.
wizards.
Yeah.
It's Gandalf in space, all right? um, where other than folklore, where else have you drawn inspiration?
Oh goodness, I draw in from one thing I did was what really influenced me to choose the way I wrote Becca was because I kind of looked at my sister and kind of wrote her having similar circumstances because my sister is a widow and she lost her husband whenever she had 3 children. One was an infant. And so I saw how she experienced this, and she had been a home mother. She hadn't had a job in forever. I don't even know if because she got married early, so I don't even know if she actually had a job. And I wanted that kind of person that was really thrown for a loop whenever she loses her husband, because she's not only are you dealing with the loss of your husband, but you're also dealing with all these things that you really didn't do. Your husband did for you. So she definitely influenced me when it came to that. So, I mean, I look at real life and see what people are doing and what's going on around me.
Now, what advice would you give to a new writer?
That's easy. Right. It is amazing how many people tell me, I want to be a writer. You can't be a writer if you don't write. You're never going to finish anything if you don't write. You may write only 5 minutes a day. You may write only 1 day a week. But the point is, if you keep doing it, eventually you're going to have a short story or a book or something. And then from there, you learn as much as you can about the trade and continue. So that's the best advice I could give anybody who wants to write. It took me a long time to actually get to that point. I started a lot of books that I never finished. And in fact, the way I got started being more serious about my writing was I found out a friend of mine was writing too, and we both complained how we just weren't getting as much done. So she sent me the beginning of a story, and she told me what we're going to do is we're going to go back and I'll write a little bit, I'll give it to you, you write a little bit. Let's just keep going back and forth. So at least we're writing once a day, and we have some kind of you'll let me know, you're waiting for something. And that actually turned out to be Zari Reed's first book, Daisy Dukes and Cowboy Boots. And from there we wrote, several other books. We published 3 of them. We've got 2 more that we haven't published. We're both right now focusing more on our own careers, but I would like to see the other books get published too. But then whenever I saw I could do that, I said, okay, well, if I can do that, I can write my own book. It's nice to have, especially if you're new to writing, it's good to have some kind of support group, other people that are in the same circumstances, and people that are in different places in their careers. So you're talking to people that have done this for years and years and years, yet you're also talking to people who might be like you and have just been writing seriously for, a year or 2.
Yeah, I've been writing since 2016. I used to belong to a writing group, but when they broke up, I haven't found one since. It's often, though, I suppose I'd say if there's no writing group, start one. But
it's a lot of work. I had some monkey wrenches thrown into my career. I wrote a book whenever I was like in my 20s, young 20s, and it was horrible. And I just said, okay, obviously I can't write. And this was in the dark ages where you weren't able to just pop on the computer and find a writing class to take or something. And I put it on hold and had kids. Moved to Scotland. Decided, okay, I'm going to take writing classes. I took mail-in writing classes. That's how old I am. And I took it, and I was feeling really good about myself, and I sent out some short stories, and I got viral encephalitis and went to the hospital. And viral encephalitis is whenever a virus travels to your brain. I remember, I guess, a few weeks before Halloween, being sick. Apparently, I collapsed. I don't remember collapsing. The next thing I remember is early December going to my son's concert. So I lost like over a month. And it affects, at least for me, it affected being able to retrieve information. And I had to do all these special tasks and stuff to kind of get back to wherever I was able to do things. But I remember I couldn't read. I could read if you held up, here, read this. Yes, that says stop. That says Jane walked across the street, whatever. But to read a book, I couldn't read a book because I would read so many pages, and by about the 5th page, I would forget what I read before. So I never could get through, a book of any appreciable length until, I got better. Whenever you have viral encephalitis, at least when I did, they said through a year, you'll get better, but after a year, that's it. You're probably not going to improve anymore. I was a lucky person because I improved quite a bit. I still have problems retrieving information, finding words. Certain words will just disappear, and it's very frustrating. But there are people that had viral encephalitis and can't boil an egg. They don't remember what their husband's name is, and they never do. They never recover from that. So I was lucky in that. But that really threw me for a loop. And then I moved back to the States, started taking more classes, met my friend, and things got a lot better from there. But yeah.
Of course, a lot of people report that writing is too stressful. I don't think it's too stressful. A lot of people tell me that it's actually relieving a stress, but eventually, stress is actually I believe it's just your body's way saying, hey, you got to take a break. But everybody deals with stress differently. How do you deal with stress?
I actually write, and I've
Mm.
done that for a long time. I kept a diary from whenever my first diary was when I was in 4th grade, and I wrote one every year until I got married. So I wrote poetry, very bad poetry, but poetry. That's one of my major ways of dealing with stress. That and exercising.
Yeah, exercising your mind, writing, and exercising your body. That
Yeah.
is actually a very good way of dealing with stress. Now, what do you do or like to do when you are not writing?
Obviously I read, but I like to go hiking. We recently moved to a country region and with a lot of hiking trails, and we're going to take advantage of those. I hiked a lot in Scotland. It was great, just gorgeous. I like the opera. I especially like the ballet. I like to go to different restaurants and try different foods. I like to try new things. I really do. Um, there's a lot of things I've done that I didn't ever think I would do before, because I came from a small town. I never got on an airplane until after I was married. So I've come a long way from that little girl from Oklahoma. But I will pretty much try just about anything once.
Yeah, once. That's fair. Just about anything. I mean, we do have something in our mind that says, well, I don't have to try this to know that it's not a good idea. Putting on as you hand back the superhero cape and say, no, I actually don't think jumping off the back of this, off the back of the porch is a good idea.
Yeah, yep. You're invincible when you get a little older. Then you're like, no, that was a dumb idea whenever I did it, and I'm not going to do anything like that again. Which I've done some very stupid things before, and I'm lucky I survived them.
I think we all have, but I mean, I recommend anybody who wants to write to write. Pick up a book, pick up The Art of Writing. There are free versions of the book. The original version is free on Amazon. It'll give you outlines of how to get started. There are writing courses. I actually myself do writing tips videos on that. We're not. I say to people, when you're not writing, you're reading. That's you switch. It's like a mode, when you're not writing, you're reading. And
So,
I thank you for coming. And any final thoughts?
no, thanks a lot for having me. I've enjoyed it. I will say, if anybody signs up for my newsletter, signing up for my newsletter, you get a free short story that is about Greg and the first time he became keeper. So that's always fun. And I'm usually on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram if anybody wants to talk to me or connect.
I'll add your Twitter. I just realized I didn't have your Twitter in the original description. I'll fix that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I've got your website and everything else there on. No, I don't think I got your website. Did you
Okay.
send it, or
I was going to say
well, send
too.
it to me?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. The website's, zoetasia.com. So
yeah.
it's, um, I was
I
also
think
going
you.
to say
Yeah.
that if anybody is interested in the Shrouded Isle series, that they don't want to commit to a long book because I write 90,000 plus books. I also have a novella and a novelette out. And I have
Right.
had people just read that, and then it's a small commitment, and then decide, yeah, that's something I definitely am interested in. and gone on to read the other books.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Please share this video around. If you like the video, give us a like, subscribe to the channel. Zoe's links, as well as mine, are in the description below. I'll be adding her website. Thank you for coming, Zoe. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Bye.